So, Beowulf. It's a story that we read.
Is it? I can't read.
I would say that, I mean, I don't know. Y'all liked Beowulf. See, okay, maybe, I don't know. Usually, one of the first things I say about Beowulf is that I'm not a huge fan of it. And then I also get a whole bunch of people who give me discussion posts that say they aren't a huge fan of it. This time, I didn't say that. Guess who all likes Beowulf? Lots of people. But then I hear you just a moment ago, and I was like, let's talk about Beowulf. Well, y'all didn't make that noise quite that loud, but I mean, it was like that. I could see it in your faces. You weren't super excited to talk about Beowulf instead of State Troopers, which I'd always rather talk about Beowulf and a State Trooper. Granted, I'm not married to one, but I would think that would almost be more motivation. But Beowulf, everybody talked about how you liked it, and so I kind of felt, I don't know, I felt like a little bit of peer pressure. I was like, but is it good? And granted, it's good. It's just not my kind of good. It's literature. I don't know. I've never felt like it's especially compelling. I read it and it feels false. It feels clunky. Structurally, it doesn't seem to move from moment to moment. It just seems like jarring transitions that come out of nowhere. That's my personal feelings on it. But y'all all seem to like it. Why'd you like it?
My cat has to disagree with you.
Your cat likes it?
No. Well, I mean, I don't know. I downloaded the audiobook and started playing it, and I was like, she gave me this look, and I'm like, yeah.
So she disagrees with me?
She
gave you a nice look?
She gave me a dirty look, and then she rolled over and went to sleep.
So it sounds like she's on my side, I guess. A little bit. Well, I mean, I don't find it, like, when I read it, I don't really find it entertaining, I guess. I find it more like, we have this because it's, like, historical, and, like, it gives us sort of the beginnings of writings in English, even though it itself is not fully English. You kind of call it Old English, but when you look at it, I think we looked at it on the screen the other day, it kind of looks a little like German. Kind of like Swedish. It's like a Germanic English. So like that's kind of our way to contextualize it. When we get to Middle English with Chaucer, it's more, and kind of a little bit with Sergo, it's more like a Frenchish English with a little bit of German influence. But I don't know. To me, like when it comes to like this is like a piece of, because I like to be entertained as well. I like to find something to be not just here for historical purposes, but also entertaining. Also good as a story, something that's compelling. I don't find Beowulf to be a compelling character at all. Like I find almost zero interest in the guy. That's me. Why do you find him compelling? You all seem to.
I didn't. I never said that. I said I read it before in high school. And then,
Yeah, you didn't say it.
I like the character of Beowulf, but that's just because like he basically gave no shits and was like, I can do anything as long as I say I can. And he did. Except for the whole dragon thing.
Kind of sense.
That's right. Yeah.
But at the same time, maybe it's just those two scenarios, maybe. Because, I mean, I know there was like a discussion with this person that was like his men came with him, even though he did everything. But my point was like, well, those two scenarios he fought by himself. But how do we know if every other time, you know, they weren't there fighting with him? Like, he can seem brave in these scenarios, but...
Did he really fight with him, though?
We don't
Because I
know.
remember,
Well,
like, 10 of them went off being babies, and then one was there, like, trying to help them with the dragon.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, maybe an entourage.
I like this, because I never read it. We just watched, like, that animated movie,
Oh,
and
I'm
in
so
that
sorry.
one...
When you say anime movie, you mean not the Angelina Jolie one, or that
No,
one?
it was.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that one,
It's
he
a
was
really
like a
poorly
jerk.
CGI movie.
Yeah, he was a jerk about it. Like, when he came back, he's like, oh, I defeated them all. And then he got all the riches. But in this one, he was, like, really, in my opinion, humble. Because he always, like, thanked God and was like, God allows me to do this. And
that's why I that's why I enjoyed it better than any other story. Because, like, the hero is, like, so prideful always, and that's usually their doom.
yeah.
So for you is a comparison thing, because
Yeah.
you were like the other version you saw was so bad that you were like, this is great by comparison. And I like that he's sort of
No,
giving it
it's-
up to God in a sense, because he always does. He always says to God be the glorious and in a sense every time he does something.
He was so great. And
Yeah,
so
like in
arrogant.
Well, I mean, if you read like when he's coming back to the land of Deep or whatever the hell that place is called. Sorry.
Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, it's good
But when
enough.
he comes back, he's not like keeping all the treasure that he got and stuff.
Yeah,
He's
he
sharing it
just-
with the king that he represents, and it's not, he's not being a greedy, conqueror basically. He's just kind of.
Well, that might have been more of an obligation for them. Since he
That's
was
true.
such a
That is true because he's representing the.
He probably couldn't have killed him.
Well, and he had already said that if I do die going to fight this beast, send it all back.
He did say, or not did say, but like one of the things that was kings at the time, the best kings were considered those who essentially provided for their peoples. Even when they would go to war, it was to get the spoils to bring back to their peoples and then share with their peoples. Was one of the main functions of a good king. In fact, at the time, one of the assumptions that was made about good kings during that era, I think even like at a political level, was people assume that a good king would just go to war. That's just what kings do. They go to war, they prove themselves greater in battle, and they bring glory to their nation and spoils stuff. So that would have been, I think, part of the assumption of what he would do is to, if he goes and he kills the dragon, he's getting rid of a threat and he's, getting the stuff back to give to his people.
I thought kings would keep that stuff back then. Like, it wasn't for the people. I thought it was them. Like, they just kept it.
Imagine a king.
He would do that too, but I mean, this was a time when I don't think they were really. This was almost like a meritocracy. The greatest warriors would become the kings.
Was this the 8th century to think so?
Yeah, and like you could essentially choose a king by, or the one who became the best warrior could be a king. It's somewhere between 700s and 1100s. There's no set.
Charlemagne era? That's like hardcore king, big boy. I don't care about my people. What do you do?
Well, I mean, this is kind of the beginnings of England, though, as a place. So as this is being written in England about the Danish and the Geats, wait, what was I saying? There you go. Something about. So yeah, it was kind of in a sense a meritocracy where you would prove your worthiness to be a king and become a king. So there wasn't that sense, I don't think, of divine right yet, at least here. So that, like, I think divine right is a lot of reason why kings would often take a lot for themselves. I mean, technically the people could kind of upend their king if they wanted to and take all the crap from him. So, he would give a lot of things, like, and there was a lot of references to that. A lot of the kennings that are used. I didn't even mention kennings before we read it, but kenning is like it's a construction where you'd see two nouns put next to each other used as a descriptor. So some of the examples I've written here, mead hall, it's like a hall for mead. Hall troops in the hall. Wall hangings, frothing wave vat, shield bearer, sword swinger, ring giver. And ring giver was one of the ones that was used, like a lot of this giver, like it was used in there to kind of, a good king will give the things that he gets in war to his people. So I was like considered to be part of good kingship, I think, at that time, to do so. And this is before divine right, because ironically enough, a lot of people will use God as an excuse to do terrible things. Really, any god. They're often used for ways of controlling a populace. And it makes sense because most religions are built upon sets of rules that you're supposed to follow, or a punishing god will punish you. And often those rules happen to benefit those who are currently in power, like follow the leaders and like do what is right and
Give money to the
don't
church.
get out of line.
But a lot of times they didn't even believe it themselves. They just used it to manipulate, like, how they wanted.
Right. Religion can be used to manipulate in that way, and it's a sad thing, but it's a sad truth, but it can be used in that way. And I don't think that he was operating from divine right here, so it didn't quite have that. It was more tribal, I guess, in a sense. It reminded me a little bit of the Dothraki in Game of Thrones, where
Whoever fought their way to the top.
yeah, you essentially fight your way to the top, and now you're the guy who's the king because you were the best fighter. But they would just sort of fight each other for no reason. There wasn't really a reason for it. They would just, I kill you, now I'm king. Beowulf was more, he was a nicer guy, I guess. Interestingly, I don't know if you felt this way when you read it. Like the first few times I read it, I felt that the God stuff was almost tacked on. It felt like I was reading a story that somebody came back and when they read it, they went, no, this needs some God stuff in it. And they shoved it all in. And that's been disproven. That they said that like it's been, the whole thing was written with God in mind. It was written as a Christian tale from the beginning. I don't know how they can tell that, but they can. Like they've done the linguistic stuff and looked at it and said. Additionally, there was theories that because it makes this is one of the problems I have with the story myself, is that we have first monster Grendel, right? What's next? Grendel's mother. What's the next logical step? 50 years later and a dragon. Like what? Like I don't know. It just didn't seem to progress to me in a logical way. It was like Grendel's mom. And let's skip 50 years. Now there's a dragon. And I almost felt like, well, it feels like a different person hopped in and decided, well, here's where Beowulf would be next. Like he writes the sequel years later or something. But they've done a linguistic analysis of it. They actually use computer and software to break down the vocabulary and found that the vocabulary is very consistent across the entire thing, and it could only have been written by one person based on the manuscript that they have. Yeah.
You did say before it was written down that I was obviously told from person to person.
See that? I when I said that, I said there was a lot of oral tradition. And Beowulf, there may have been. I always get a little fuzzy on this, but there was. I don't know if here's the problem. There was a book of monsters and characters that existed, and I don't know whether that book predates Beowulf or if it was after Beowulf and has a Grendel and Grendel's mother and dragons in it. It's like a book of monsters that existed around that time. I don't know if Grendel originated in Beowulf. I can't recall. Originated in Beowulf and then later was included, or if Grendel was a character that existed and then the guy used the Grendel character for Beowulf. He decided, oh, I'll use the Grendel in Beowulf. That sounds pretty good. I don't really 100% know that. So I know that there were some whispers of stories being told. And there were, I'm sure, stories of kings and monsters that they would defeat. There already had been the Iliad and the Odyssey, which had these supernatural beings and stuff. So it was precedent for it. Just the question was whether this was told in the oral tradition and then written down, or whether it was originally written down.
How it's the way you even said it, I have to agree. He just randomly goes, okay, well, 50 years later, and now he's a super old man, and here's just another random thing that he did. It's almost like they were telling a story, and he's like, oh, but here's what happened next.
I don't know.
I have to disagree with you on the religious perspective.
Which part?
Just the fact that maybe in some places they don't highlight the God perspective, because if you think about it, I'm not overly religious, so if some of you are, I'm sorry if I get words wrong, but if you think about it, somewhere in the Bible it says that God cast out the serpent. Well, what is a dragon basically? A big snake. So it just, depending on how you look at it, from which viewpoint, from what religion, it's there, but some parts are highlighted, some aren't. So I have to disagree with you.
I still don't know what part you're disagreeing with. That it's not in there? That I said it feels tacked on?
Yeah, that it
Oh,
feels
okay.
tacked on.
I think the part that feels tacked on to me is the pagan nature of the story and the pagan rituals as it seems. To me, it didn't feel like there was a whole lot of Christianly stuff, with the exception of when God was specifically mentioned. And dragons had existed in a religious form, I think, more in. I don't know what the origin of dragons in medieval literature. I don't know if it came from an interpretation of like the Leviathan in the Bible, or if there had already been heard whispers of dragons in Chinese myth, because they existed there. But dragons, I think, are more of a luck and good thing in Chinese tradition, and with us, it's more of a scary, flying, eat you kind of thing. I learned that from one of my students who was from Laos. Mutita was her name. But I didn't know that about Asian dragons. And why people always want to be born in the year of the dragon, I was like, that sounds scary. But to me, he's not a very Christian guy. I don't know. Maybe it's because I know what's coming next. I know that Sir Gawain is the next thing we're going to read. And Sir Gawain is very, in the way in which he approaches problems, he seems very Jesus-like to me. And maybe Beowulf is more Old Testament, where it's like his solution to everything is let's just whack it until it's dead. Like that's his solution with Beowulf. Weirdly, I according to Sir Gawain, when we read it, supposedly Sir Gawain at the time before that, when it was written, was, I think his reputation was as a bit of a ladies' man. At least that's what the implication is in Sir Gawain. Was that he was known as being a ladies' man, but he actually comes across as more like chaste and controlled. And I don't know if our origins of thinking of him as chaste actually come from Sir Gawain or not, but he's more like Christ-like, where he's trying not to. His first thought isn't always just swing a sword. He tries to talk his way out of the problem while still being kind of nice about it. He tries to resist temptation. Whereas it's hard for me to like look at Beowulf doesn't seem to. What I don't like is he's never really challenged. Even at the end, he's like what 80 years old, and that's when he loses to a dragon.
I wanted to bring it up as well. Like, what is Beowulf? Is he just like half man, half giant? The dude has to be like. If Grendel was easily just swinging down things left and right, and then this man just walks up like, I'm just gonna beat you with my bear.
Yeah, and I don't like how like there's no like he's not clever in the way that I want my heroes to be.
Yeah.
He doesn't have like mental fitness. I mean, I'm sure this is probably one of the problems that I have with Beowulf is that he's essentially everything the opposite of I am. He's completely and totally physical.
He's the Hulk without a brain.
Seems to be perfect, but also he's like he's a singular note kind of hero. Like he just has this one motivation, and he never strays from it. And it's like most people, at least think about things. He's just like always, yes, of course, whatever that means. But with I don't know, Beowulf, he even gets lucky. Like it doesn't. I mean, maybe you could say, well, he asked God, then God answered, but that's really convenient. How he shows up and he's like, well, I'm not gonna use my sword, and it just says literally in the text is like, he's lucky he didn't too, because he's immune to blades. What luck! And I was like, but then next when he goes to Grendel's mom, he's like, we'll go back to swords. Like it's because then he needs to me it just kind of befuddles me, like how a lot of like his success he doesn't.
Maybe it was his children.
He just kind of gets lucky, even though he's asking for God's help.
They're just like trying to make kids think they can be Beowulf or be big and strong.
Well, that's just gonna get a lot of kids killed.
Well, it did act as though while he is like, what is he? It does seem as though his strength comes from God. Like it seems very much like it's implied that that's where it comes from.
8 foot tall, right?
But he doesn't seem to he doesn't seem to try to talk out any problems. It's just like, what is this Grendel thing? And like,
beat it down.
I feel like there's no real consideration here. Well, I don't know. This is me and my modern sensibilities. Like I feel like it says Grendel, right? He was this descendant of, or Grendel. The reason Grendel and other like trolls and goblins and things exist is like, what was it? It was like when Cain kills Abel, and like Abel's blood spills into the ground, and that like then it seeps in, and like they're the descendants of evil, essentially. The descendants of Cain. Yeah.
I mean,
not the blood on the ground, but literal descendants.
When you look at the Bible, all of his offspring are supposed to be cursed. He's supposed to be doomed to walk the world forever with a mark on him, so no one can hurt him.
Right.
Any pain that goes to him is brought back on the person 10 times over or something like that. But he's also supposed to be cursed, and like everything that he spawns is supposed to be evil.
And they literally take it in a sense of like, let's make them look different and monsters. And I was like, yeah, okay. But there's still never a attempt at all to like think from the villain's perspective. Like, let's say that you live in at home, okay? You have a nice place out in the country. You just want quiet. One day, a bunch of freaking like college kids, they build a little tent city in your front yard, and they start just drinking, having fun every day. And they start building like an actual house in your front yard. And you keep going over there and you're like, get the hell off my lawn. What are you doing? You start like trashing their tents and crap, throwing their beer. They keep coming back for some reason. You're just like, get the hell out of here. And they won't go. And then finally they built a whole house and you keep busting in the house. Being like, get the hell off of my lawn. What's going on? And then you keep doing this over and over again until some guy that's bigger and stronger comes and rips your arm off. And then you're running away like back to your house like, what the hell? It's my land. Like, I don't know how old Grendel is or how long he's been there, but he's very pissed off that people are on what he considers to be his land partying.
Doesn't he go straight to killing them?
Yeah.
He does go straight to killing.
Like,
You make a fair point.
Go, hey, can you guys calm down a little bit? I'm trying to sleep.
However, I must also point out that in Texas law, I think we kind of we can do the same thing,
I
right?
feel like back then it'd be the same thing too. It was very.
on the other hand, they did it for years and they didn't take a hint. You know.
They're like, why don't he just keeps coming? Like, what do we do? More parties!
5 miles down the road.
And then like,
The meat hall.
is it Hrothgar the name of the king?
Yeah.
So bad with these Danish names. Hrothgar's all, I just don't know what to do. What do we do? We need help.
Maybe we should make the parties louder.
More beer?
And
Let's invite him.
and see, like, I don't even find, like, I'm not that impressed when, I mean, I sort of am a little bit impressed, but, like, I mean, this is probably the one thing that's super redeemable, I think, that Beowulf does, but I don't know. Part of me thinks it's not. So, like, Hrothgar's like, we need help. And then he's like, I hear about this help that you need. I shall come and I shall help you. This is what good men do. To God be the glory. And so he comes and like helps them, like out of just apparently goodwill, which is not something you do. It's like you're very tribal. You stick to your tribe unless there's a war to be had. But he goes and helps another tribe, and that's impressive.
I think one of the things I read was that he might have helped them because his father owed like a debt to the king, because like the king or his father needed the king's help or something. So that was probably one of the possible reasons he had.
I don't remember that.
I can
Family.
I think it was just like Beowulf's father knew.
Yeah, there was some relationship there, but like they still were separate tribes. There was no technical obligation. So like him doing so was like kind of more of a political, not even a political move to him. It wasn't like he was just doing it because he said like these people need help. I'll just go help them, which is the good guy thing. But at the same time, I guess because he's so strong and because he's so basically invincible, I don't know. When somebody's invincible, I get very unimpressed and like, I will help. Like when Superman in Superman movies is always like, I shall help them. I'm like, well, shouldn't you?
But he
That's why the
died.
Justice League.
Yeah.
That's why the Justice League.
He didn't die.
Yeah, he did.
We
They
can't
brought
beat
him back.
Steppenwolf. Let's bring in Superman. He's back alive. We won't see. So Justice League was terrible.
If you have to bring somebody back. to
Steppenwolf.
life.
That's a stupid name for a character.
You know who he's supposed to be, right?
Who?
He's It's not Doomsday. Darkseid's younger brother is who Steppenwolf is supposed to be.
Oh.
And it's just, yeah.
Okay. I don't feel any better about the name.
DC characters are terrible. All of their names
I don't know
are
what's
terrible.
going on. Like,
They're all bad.
Batman's the
Yeah.
only good storyline to me.
That was something I was wondering about. It's like back then, having another person is coming like, hey, I'm from another land, you know. My king is better because we just did this. Like that would seem I feel dishonorable. Like for the you know, hey, we really need help. Our kingdom is really weak. We can't deal with this. And another person comes up and like, oh, hey, look how good our kingdom is. Like I feel like that would have been very bad having like an outsider come in. That was the way I viewed it. Like it's very. I mean, you want your place to be strong. You know, hey, we dealt with this problem on our own. And so whenever, like at least back then, it was very frowned upon whenever you have like.
But they're teenage.
That is true, also. Yeah. So
Wow.
I don't know if we can actually trust this.
Wow.
It may have just been a kind of a.
Another team. I mean, nothing.
I mean, if we're gonna the Scandinavians are pretty
They have
scary.
pastries named after them.
Did you
What
see
the
the
hell?
North Sea?
I don't know what I was about to say.
They took over, like, all of
Obligation? Obligation? Desperation? I don't know. Somehow I was going to relate it to this, so I'm going to keep talking. But I feel like there was I don't know. I don't know. Say again the main gist of what you were saying. For some reason I lost it.
The main gist is basically if one kingdom is not able to solve its own problem and another kingdom has to come over and fix it,
You would think that
You would
kingdom
think-
would take over.
either take over or that kingdom's going to seem weak. Like, why would you want that, like, to be so
No.
open and known?
Maybe that's why they waited
Oh.
years, you know. And
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a long time, yeah.
Yeah,
We can handle
maybe.
this
I
ourselves,
don't
you
know.
know.
I'm sure he didn't want to seem weak, but at a certain point, when your
That's
people can't do anything,
That
they're
is
just getting
true.
murdered in their
Yeah.
10
sleep,
years.
you kind of take whatever help you can get at that
Yeah.
point. Like,
I
we're
don't
losing
know.
men like, you know, a boat with a
Maybe-
hole in it.
maybe they
getting
should-
It's like when you're telling one of those big lies, you just can't tell it anymore. You're like, listen, I've kept this going for, like, yeah, honey, I know you're 14, you're just hearing this now. You're not really my kid. I can't hide it anymore. You're like, what? I'm like, what? It's like, that was a shock. But they were like, listen, we tried to hold this up like we're this strong nation. There's been this little monster guy. He's been terrorizing for like 7-8 years. We're dying. We need help. Okay? We can't do this on our own.
Word of mouth also really is like the food itself.
Yeah, well, yeah.
It just, for me, that was the thing that really put it off to me. Like, that really, like it separated it even more. It was like, okay, well, just another kingdom's gonna fix all the problems.
I mean, desperation will do a lot of things to people. I think that's part of it. Yeah. It very well could. I guess that was part of the lesson too, though, is that Beowulf comes and he doesn't just take over their kingdom. You know, what he probably had the power to, and just decides, nah, he's like, here I am. But I don't know. It's really weird. But like the whole Unferth thing, I think was supposed to make me feel like you know how like in stories there's a foil character, like a character that only exists to provide a contrast to another character so that they can show their good qualities by not being bad like this other character. I felt like Unferth was supposed to be that, like he's this little cocky, you can't do this guy, and Beowulf is all like, I absolutely can and will do this, you're nothing. And later Unferth's like pouting, and you know, Beowulf is like, he's done it. But to me, I just felt like that was, you're Beowulf. Like, nothing can beat you and you know it. It's like, it serves nothing to be prideful and, like, explain to the guy, no, maybe it's not prideful, maybe it's, like, all up to God, but still, you know the guy can't beat you. You know the guy has, like, there's no point for him to even be saying the things he's saying because you can swim straight down for what seems like 12 hours and not have to breathe. That's not normal. Most people can't do that. Most people can't rip the arm off of a monster that's bigger than them, which I assume is bigger than them. Like, I thought he was going to start. Did he start beating him with the arm? No. I mean, I was expecting him to.
He just ripped it off.
And he took his head.
Yeah, I kept wanting to like beat him with his own arm because I just felt like that would be like perfect. To the glory of God.
You
Might
should
be
rewrite
Stop hitting yourself. Stop hitting yourself.
You should rewrite it.
Nah, I just
starts beating.
I just
you.
want it to be I just want it to be smoother. But like I don't know, the unfair thing, honestly, because that guy, we already know that guy is so much weaker than him. There's nothing can do to him. While it's supposed to make a foil to make me realize how great Beowulf was, that people think that he's not great, and he's like, no, but I am great. Like to me, it just made him look like more of a jerk, because like it'd be like Superman being like, I can and I will. It'd be like, well, we all know you can and you will. Bullets bounce off of you. Like there's no reason for you to, develop a sense of like braggadocio over this. Like it's, you are what you are. I've always thought of Beowulf as Superman, always, because it's like Superman. Like they literally had to like go, oh, kryptonite is the only thing can hurt, like stop him. And I was like, okay. They had to come up with something, otherwise it's just like it doesn't matter what story you see now. It's just like that was what always I hated about Superman. It was like any Superman story, it was like, oh no, what's the thing in the plot that's going to make Superman somehow vulnerable? It's kryptonite, and it just comes. Doesn't matter what it is, it's always kryptonite.
It's like Achilles. I hate that because it's like
The Achilles heel, yeah.
And it's like, why don't you just dip the other?
Yeah, exactly.
Go back and do a double.
I always had a problem with that. They were like, hold him by the heel.
Drop him.
And then like who's the person who's like, there we go, now he's invincible, except for this one like heel part. I could grab the other foot and dip him, but I don't want to get this invincible juice on my own thumbs. Like who?
Wait,
No one
no,
said his
if we're
mother
going
was a
by-
genius.
If we're going by the Percy Jackson lore here, though, okay, doesn't he have to have like a place that is still mortal so that he doesn't, so he can like keep his mortality? Or something
That sounds like revisionist history by
It is. It's
like the
Rick
Rick
Riordan.
Riordan, yeah. That sounds like revisionist history. He's like, everybody hates this about Achilles. We'll
We'll give it a reason.
there's a reason this is here. It's like, but sometimes I feel like that's done. Maybe that's a brilliant thing that he did, but somebody did that one time brilliantly. Scott Snyder did that with the character of Mr. Freeze. They did like a one-off comic about Mr. Freeze and like how he's a scientist who's searching for a way to like help his wife, and like something went wrong in like his cryogenic experiments. Like she died of something, and something went wrong in his cryogenic experiment, so that now he has to be in this like suit all the time. He was trying to look for ways to revive her and make her better, but he had her frozen until he could do that or something like that. That was his background. So Scott Snyder made it where like over the course of this particular episode of this comic, you realize he was the one who killed his wife, and he froze her out of guilt, and has convinced himself since that he's not this evil guy, that he's actually trying to help her, when in reality he's the one who hurt her in the first place, and he's changed his own. And I was like, well, that's brilliant, because then it takes a guy that was for some reason operating purely out of evil, supposedly for good, but then he just does evil stuff all the time. It didn't make any sense to me, but that makes a lot more sense that the guy does evil things because he's got the beginnings of evil too. This does not have that. This, I don't know, most of the stuff that comes in here just kind of feels forced to me. He feels like a Superman character where he's completely invulnerable. And I had trouble, I mean, the dude, he's only invulnerable when he's 80, and it's a dragon. I mean, come on.
Maybe all day trauma kicked
Maybe, I guess.
It's not that he.
It was a real Moses scenario to me, too. Tell me what you're
It's
going
not that he wouldn't move. It's he couldn't move because geriatric.
I remember you saying, I think it was last class where like someone brought up in a discussion post that they were worried that the dragon was going to attack again or whatever, and they were confused about that.
What?
Never mind.
I don't know. Maybe dragon attack again?
Something like that. You said that there was a discussion post where someone was worried about the dragon. Because they're like, oh, what if it, like, or like he got bit and then they're all going to die too or something like that.
I don't know. I know that everybody was kind of like left him behind except Wiglaf. Maybe that. I don't know.
I was very confused about that.
Yeah, I don't recall saying it, so that's even more confusing for
I
me.
must be thinking,
I may have said it, I just don't recall. Yeah, really.
I'll
He
consult the
will.
recording.
He will.
But yeah, I've got it posted. So the the Moses thing. This is the first time I've considered this idea, but it kind of reminded me of it seems like everybody he comes into contact with is sort of like the story of like Moses, where there's like all those plagues, right? And then they all get out of Egypt, and then there's like the parting of the Red Sea, but before that they're like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? God has led us into this terrible. And they go across the Red Sea. And then like he goes up to get the 10 Commandments, and they literally like over the course of like what, like I don't know, like a week or two, month, I can't remember. It's like it's not very long. Was it 40 days and 40 nights?
That was Jesus.
I know, but wasn't it also the same time period for Moses? I thought that was why it was a parallel. Then he had to go back for like almost an equivalent amount of time the second time. I don't really recall exactly how long it was, but they were like, "Oh my gosh!" And they like literally start like making their own gods out of metal, like out of jewelry that they got lying around. And I was just like, seriously? They were very well, yeah. Did you say holy cow?
I said golden cow, but yeah.
Oh, I said holy cow, and I was like, that's why I made that weird sound. Is I was like, oh, holy cow, hilarious. That was really funny. I thought you were making a joke you weren't making, but so I'm the brilliant one, right? Because I heard it.
That's right.
I heard the brilliance, and I turned it into a dad joke. But I literally, like, I was so steeped in dad jokes. Like I heard a dad joke where there wasn't one. It's not for us. We don't do the folder thing.
I was about to say, you're right here.
Yeah, and you're all in the room. So I don't know. I feel like people are never like even in the Bible times. It was like people were. It was something they always wanted to. They included in the stories in the Bible was that people generally aren't grateful and almost have no memory for like being helped, which is true with Beowulf when like he rips the arm off. They're like, yay! And then Grendel's mom comes and takes the arm. Like, no. And Beowulf dives down, and they're like, Annie's dead, and they wander off. And they're like, no, I'm alive. Like, oh, yay! And then like he goes and fights the dragon, and they're like, F this, and they get out of there. And it's like the whole like, will people not learn that Beowulf is like worth, following? I don't know. But that seems like that was one of the bigger themes that was trying to be talked about. Is like, don't be a bunch of wusses. Help your king. Because the other big problem I have with the plot of this is for whatever reason, it's like they didn't know where to fit the lesson in because they were too busy talking about Beowulf and like his pursuits. And they were like, how do I fit like actual theme in? Let's just shove this random historical episode sung by a bard into the middle. Did y'all notice that?
Yeah.
It like goes into italics and you're like, what's happening? And he's like, and there's a story I'm going to tell you of some other completely different time while you eat and celebrate. And I'm like, what is this? Like, it's like if you switch in like the middle of a movie to a musical number, but it's not related to the current movie, I was just like, what is happening? Or it's all just one big metaphor. It doesn't actually, you can't really, but, oh, I meant to bring the book, but I didn't.
The room, go to the bathroom, somebody changes the channel, and you're like,
Can I borrow your book, Michaela? I left my... Wait, did I? Yeah, I left my book.
Running to Lightroom from old Rorik's then.
Do you trust Jarrett with it for a second? Yes, thank you. Let's see. So, Beowulf has a note in that one section. The first sticky note. Gotcha. And so I need the Friesland episode. I like your post-it note. And your sticky notes. They're all the same. Where are you, italic section? There it is. Which I think literally the note is not until afterwards. Yeah. So it says, when they're celebrating after Grendel. So the Bard's song here is known as the Finnsburg episode. Did y'all want me to read that note in the book? Did y'all see that? It's weirdly very important. It's about it's more important than the reading of it itself, because the reading of itself is very confusing. I'm like, what is this? But it helps make sense of almost the entirety of Beowulf and why it's structured in the way it does once you read it. Like it says, this allusive style, or like referential style, makes the tale obscure in many details because it's sung by a bard about this Finnsburg situation. So there's an old English song that existed prior to this that modern editors have entitled The Fight at Finnsburg. And Hildebert, the daughter of the former Danish king Hawk, and this was always very hard for me to keep up with even when I was reading this note. So you have Hawk as a king, and Hildeburh is the daughter of Hawk. She marries Finn, so they marry her to Finn, who is the king of Friesland, presumably to help end a feud between their peoples. So they're like, they do that thing where like, let's have a wedding and have that marriage bridge the gap between our peoples in the feud, much like they tried to do with,
Right.
yes, sort of like Brave, but they had already sort of silenced the feud, and they said, well, let's do the marriage to continue to keep the feud away. I don't know if somebody sneezed, but bless you, maybe? That was very loud yelling, if not. Screams. And as the episode opens, the feud has already broken out again. So, like, I guess the marriage didn't work. When a visiting party of Danes, led by Hildeburh's brother Henef, so I guess he doesn't give a crap about the whole truce, who has succeeded their father, is attacked by a tribe called the Jutes. Not even technically the Friesland people. The Jutes are considered subject to Finn, but may be a clan distinct from the Frisians, which sounds a lot like, almost like they've inherited that story a little bit from what happened. What was the name of that war? Not the Trojan War. Peloponnesian War. Because essentially the Peloponnesian War. Wait, am I right? And that was the one between Sparta and Athens.
Between Sparta and
yeah.
Athens, yes.
So what happened was Athens had these little towns that were subject to it. Sparta had little towns that were subject to it. And one of the little Spartan towns, like, attacked one of the little Athens towns, or the other way around. And that was what started the whole, because there was always the not stress, what do you call it, the tensions. But that sort of broke it out, where they were saying you need to be held responsible for your people that did this, and they said, well, you need to be held responsible for your people. This is not our fault. This is their fault. And they were like, no, we're not doing this anymore. They're like, you're responsible for what they did. And so then the whole war started out, but they were able to able to hold them off because they were behind these big old Athenian walls, at least for a time until bacterias came and they all got sick. Huh? And Sparta just didn't eat that sickness grain because they were growing their own stuff, and so they never got sick. But I think it's similar to like here because the Jutes are supposedly subject to Finn, so it's like Finn is somehow responsible for what the Jutes do. Like he can't keep his people in line, I guess. And Finn does not seem to have instigated the attack. So in the ensuing battle, both Henef and the son of Hildeburh and Finn are killed, and both sides suffer heavy losses. So what's left, it says, in the ensuing battle, both Henef, so that's her brother, and the son of Hildeburh, so her son, and Finn, her husband, are killed. And both sides suffer heavy loss. I don't know what happens after that. They return her to her country of origin?
No, she now rules Friesland, right?
Huh?
Didn't she rule Friesland?
Yeah, I highly doubt that.
Unless there was another heir.
She is but woman.
Well, I guess it could also be she had another child.
She better hope she has a child or she's completely worthless.
Well, no, because she could have.
I'm talking about back then.
Well, yeah. Well, back then they kept on also.
We can't let a woman
Friesland
rule.
is German, so they might have been different things. That would. I don't know. There's a lot of scenarios. We need to know more about like the family of Friesland before we can make these.
I think first we need to fill in that giant dark spot on the map that supposedly is Denmark.
That is true. Yeah.
The hell is this country? Did they just add this?
DLC.
Yeah, was there an update? Fixed a glitch in Google Maps where Denmark was completely wiped off the face of the earth.
We thought it was a glitch. We thought that was
Added new rules for immigration. Next. So essentially what this whole lay was, so what happens is it's right after Beowulf saves everybody, right? So he saves them. So the implication is, I saved you, and you can have this back now, I don't need it more. The implication is, thank you, Michaela. The implication is, I've saved you, and you're like happy that I saved you, and like we have a party about it. I don't know why, but that felt really cool to say. Let's have a party about it. I don't know why. I feel like something people should say. Like, why don't you have a party about it? Like anytime you're excited. Like, that should be a phrase we say now. Like, you're so excited, why don't you have a party about it? And I will, actually. But they have a party about it.
biology.
No, I won't.
This party will be going home and playing
But what happens? Yeah, I don't have time for that. Well, grading needs to be done. But what happens is, then they tell this story, which I think is meant more or less to be a warning to listen, guys. You need to get along. You need to remember this. You need to be cool with it. This sort of bridges the gap between you guys. There was always that time when Beowulf came and helped you. But it says right at the end, the end of the whole thing, when Beowulf dies, and it says, well, it kind of sucks for the Geats. Because now they're going to be, their strong ruler is gone. They're going to get attacked and crap. And I'm sure the Danes are going to be some of the ones that are like, hey, that place is open for business now. Let's take it. It's so weird too. It's just it's weird because the lay is in the middle telling them how they should be, while also we're being told that it ain't gonna work, which is sort of a defeatist idea, I think. But nonetheless, that's what we're told, is that they're gonna end up going at each other's throats again once this little moment in history where they're able to be together is gone. Because there was this one really powerful ruler that kind of kept them from even bothering trying to take each other over. I think that's actually been, sometimes in history, there have been people that we've, writers and things that we study, and famous people throughout history that we've once regarded as great thinkers eventually end up changing their ideas to fascism. They understand authoritarianism. They're like, we get it, because when there's one person who they're in control and they're so strong that nobody else can overtake them, then it sort of makes for peace amongst everybody else. What are we supposed to do? Overtake them? There's no overtaking them. And if you it's almost I guess maybe the kind of the God thing. It's just well, I mean, we're both Christians. We're both subject to God. So it's let's know we need to fight about it. That kind of thing. It's we're both subject to this powerful king who could destroy us. I don't know if that's related or not, but it seems like it could be. But yeah, I find that while I find that Finnsburg episode really does communicate the theme well, hey, we should maybe just get along, even though we know we're not going to. I really hate how it's put in there, and the way it's put in there. It's like having a pamphlet on the theme in the middle, without finding a way to get it in there in a natural way. I like my themes to be natural. I like good writing. I always felt like Sir Gawain's more like 1984, which is a really well-written book, but Beowulf was almost like Brave New World. Has anybody read Brave New World? God, it sucks. I really hate that book. I mean, the idea is good, but when I read Brave New World, I'm like, this just doesn't feel real at all. It sounds like when sometimes philosophers will write books. They're like, I'm going to write a novel. And you're like, it's more like a thought exercise than it is actually supposed to be a believable story with believable characters. Always frustrates me. Everybody is an icon or a symbol instead of actually seeming to exist. Why do those things persist? I guess because the ideas are big? I don't know. I'm just saying stuff. I thought I saw a hand start to go up and then I put it out like a fire. Yes. Yeah, I put it out like a fire. You've got to drop it.
You didn't address
it's hot.
Just forgot what I was going to say.
Which I did address what you said?
You didn't.
Oh, I
forgot
didn't.
what I was gonna say.
So not at all did I address it, but
No, I'm just aiding.
fair enough. There's always 5 ants.
It was about the poem about. If they would have done that, let's say at the end, or there's a funeral, and they're like, hey, let's sing this song. Would that have worked better, you think, or just having that in there at all?
I think just finding a way to make it natural. I'm sorry I've already used this example today in another class, so it's what comes to mind. But a lot of people have seen these movies, so it seems to work. Have people seen the movie Frozen? Don't even. I've watched that movie 150 times. There's no way you've watched it as many times as me. Well, do you have sisters?
That's a lie.
Oh, okay, so you have. Honey, I work. I don't know if you know this, but so it just keeps vibrating. Stop it. Stop calling me. She's gonna call me again. She'll be like, "Why aren't you at class yet?" Because the class is not over.
On the dot.
I need to provide her with a schedule again. Honey. So Frozen, and there's Coco. People seen Coco? That one's really good. So Coco's better than Frozen, by the way.
What's Coco?
Coco's a better movie.
No,
It's a movie.
Talk about it, I haven't seen it
Frozen's
yet.
not bad.
Oh, I can't do
It's
Coco?
just
No, don't do
overwatched.
Coco, I haven't seen it yet.
Coco's so
no,
good.
it's special.
Frozen's not bad. It's just overwatched.
You do non-Disney.
They're about to come out with Frozen 2.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited.
This only works if I'm
Which
doing
they said it's
Coco.
going to be better than Frozen 1.
I'm excited.
How would anybody know? Nobody's
Josh
seen it
Gad
yet.
is gonna be in it again. It can't be bad.
Anybody watch Mindhunter on Netflix? So the guy who plays Holden Ford, the young guy who's got all the ideas, that's Kristoff in Frozen. Yeah. But Frozen, I'll just talk about the negative version of this. So in Frozen, when you watch that movie, I don't know if anybody else has felt this, but when I watch that movie, when Hans is all of a sudden evil, I'm like, huh?
You didn't see that coming?
No, and you didn't either.
No, but no. Here's the thing. He was literally walking around. We need blankets and stew, people. Like, he did not seem evil at all. I'm kind of on his side.
He's a nice guy.
He really
Love
is.
is an open door, Jeff.
Yes.
I'm
It
sorry.
was the chocolate fondue, okay?
No, it was instant like.
It was what?
He was acting. He was playing a role to get.
Well,
into
let
the
me
throne.
just.
Well, yeah, but how are we supposed to know that?
You don't.
Disney characters don't act. That sounds to me like you're watching the movie and like you're probably one of those people who has inklings about all kinds of characters all the time, and they're mostly wrong. You're like, I ended up not being right. But you just have these aching suspicions about people you shouldn't even suspect. You're like, this Jesus character in Passion of the Christ, I don't know, man. He seems OP. He's gonna turn on him in a minute. Like he's gonna call 10,000 angels, I bet. Watch, and then he doesn't. And you're like, oh, I knew it though. I really though.
The thing that got me about Hans is like he's like kind of rude when you first see him. Then he's like, oh, you're a princess.
When was he rude?
Oh.
When
Like
was he
his
ever
whole
rude?
attitude like kind of changes when he finds out.
No, he was super nice, and then he says, princess, and he just bows and goes, my lady.
No, the first time you meet him, he's like a super good guy.
You need to watch Frozen again. I think you've got some revisionist history memory going on here.
You remember.
Last time you watched Frozen, tell me.
Like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, not
Well,
good.
damn it, that's recent.
Like I have nieces that love that movie.
Oh, so you weren't really watching it. You were just.
No, I actually own the movie myself too, and I watch it every once in a while. Like,
Did you watch it? Like,
I've only seen one indicator that he is guaranteed. Wait, okay, but it's like the equivalent of like Eric in Little Mermaid going evil. That's what it is. Like
I've never seen it.
he's a guy who's like the prince. You haven't seen. I'm not talking about a new. I'm talking about the original
I've
Little
never seen
Mermaid.
Little Mermaid.
Well, Prince Eric doesn't go evil. That's all I gotta tell you. He's a good guy, and she wants him, so that's it.
You know, it's instant when you see him though. He's got a dog. It's like.
But I felt like
That is
I don't know. I felt like it was communicating the kind of things like Anna, while she is reckless, we're sort of supposed to love that about her, right? So, we have Hans who pops up, and she's in love. Love is an open door. We finish each other's sandwiches and whatnot. And I was like, we're supposed to love this relationship. And then but then we kind of are like, oh, I kind of wish that they weren't together though. And I was like, while I was watching the movie, I was like, I really appreciate though this mature thing that I know is going to happen, which is that Anna's going to end up choosing Kristoff, the developed relationship, over Hans, who she more or less just had a really nice evening with. Whereas with Kristoff, she's gone through something with him. It's like once you've been through something together, it changes things. So I thought he's the one that really loves her. So they'll find a way to break this off. And it was just like, if only there was someone who loved you. And I was like, this is forced. This isn't good. Like it didn't come natural at all. Maybe you felt like she was it, but it was not earned. I will say it because I can't talk about freaking Coco. You can
I'm
cover your ears for a
sorry.
second.
Which one is Coco?
The Spanish one.
But the guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I haven't seen that either.
Wait, yeah. No, that's a good one. No, that is a really good movie.
You can uncover your ears, okay?
That's a really good movie.
All right, listen.
Yeah,
First
you
of all,
can ruin it for me
a
now.
bunch of racists need to go and watch some
That's a really good movie.
some Coco.
Wow.
I know it's not your fault. Your nieces haven't watched yet, but you need to tell your is it your brother's kids?
It's my sister's.
Sister's kid. Tell your sister these kids need some diversity. Not that I'm calling you a racist.
You just did.
Moana's pretty
I'm
good.
not. I said not him. He can say I'm not. I'm calling everybody racist.
There's some kids movies I don't mind watching, but like if I'm like forced down onto the
Yeah.
couch, can't go to work because my sister actually just sits on me. So it's my fault for
Oh,
laying down
yeah.
on the couch,
No,
but
they love Frozen and Spirit, and I can't get them to watch anything
But
else. And I'm
Spirit's
like,
also
please
pretty
stop.
I wish I put Spirit on Netflix. Spirit is so good.
Oh no! Whenever the Disney thing comes out,
Right.
like those.
Yeah, it's time to go,
I'm
apparently.
not
everything.
paying for that.
I'm gonna go.
But
I'm gonna drop Netflix.
I felt Hans had not earned his place in the story. I was just like, this came out of nowhere. Like, it wasn't quite earned in the same way that anybody who's seen Coco knows that sort of like the story it's a little more earned there. It's well written. And I appreciate the well written nature of the stories like that, and y'all have a great day. Yeah. We'll talk about Beowulf more next time.
I only have time on like Thursday to write that thing. Can
Oh,
I put it in Thursday?
One more thing for the. Oh wait, everybody in the room I think submitted a discussion post, didn't they? Everybody. Over Beowulf and over. Yeah, because I have one for everybody. Make sure if you didn't submit an info sheet, you do that in the syllabus quiz. Let me know in an email, and I'll reopen it for you this one time. But I think for most part, everybody did a discussion post. So I don't have to mention that to you guys. Yeah.
But isn't this